The marble floors of the Madison Crown Hotel had seen scandals before, but nothing like this. The moment the receptionist's manicured fingers tore the check-in ticket in half, the air didn't just shift, it froze. Darius Cole, a man who'd flown across 3 time zones to close the biggest deal of his career, stood there holding the useless halves like they were the last shreds of his dignity. The smirk on the woman's face was small, calculated, and dripping with the kind of arrogance that feeds off power in tiny bursts. Around them, the late-night hum of conversation in the lobby faltered. A couple near the elevator stopped mid-step. Even the bellhop behind the luggage cart froze, one hand still gripping the handle. Darius had been in tense boardrooms, under the glare of billion-dollar negotiations, but this felt different. This wasn't business. This was personal, and she wanted it that way. "You don't look like you can afford this place," the receptionist said lightly, as if commenting on the weather. The words hit harder than the paper tear. It was supposed to be a simple check-in. He had the confirmation email, the corporate booking code, the card on file. But from the moment he approached the desk, she'd given him that smile polite enough to pass HR training, but sharpened with something else. Something uglier. "Excuse me." His voice was calm, but it carried the kind of weight that makes people rethink their choices. She didn't rethink. She doubled down. "I said, maybe you should try somewhere more in your budget." Her eyes flicked down to his tailored suit, lingered for a second too long on his skin, and then met his gaze again without flinching. Darius heard someone behind him mutter, "Damn." The humiliation was one thing. The public nature of it was another. But the way she seemed to enjoy it was what lit the fuse inside him. He placed the torn ticket halves gently on the counter. "Do you know who I am?" She leaned in slightly, as if to make sure he knew she wasn't afraid. "Not really. And it doesn't matter." That's when Darius smiled a small, knowing curve of the lips. It wasn't the smile of a man defeated. It was the smile of someone who'd just decided to stop playing defense. The lobby lights seemed a little brighter, the conversations a little quieter. Somewhere in the distance, the elevator dinged, but nobody moved. "All right," Darius said softly. "You'll find out soon enough." Darius Cole wasn't new to prejudice. He'd grown up in Atlanta, son of a postal worker and a schoolteacher, learning early that some doors opened with a smile, and some needed a battering ram. He'd built his business and investment firm specializing in underrepresented entrepreneurs on the principle that if you're not welcome at the table, you build your own damn table. And tonight, ironically, he'd been invited to one of the biggest tables in the game, a merger dinner with one of New York's most influential real estate moguls, held in the Madison Crown's exclusive rooftop restaurant. The kind of meeting that could change the trajectory of his company for years. Now, thanks to a smirk and a torn ticket, that meeting and everything he'd worked for was hanging by a thread. Or maybe not. The murmurs in the lobby started again, hushed but urgent. Darius could feel eyes on him, but he wasn't here to play the victim in someone else's spectacle. He took out his phone, scrolled to a number, and hit call. "Marcus," he said when the voice picked up. "Yeah, change of plans. I'm at the front desk. Bring him here." "No, now." The receptionist, her name tag read, Chloe was pretending to type something into the computer, but her eyes kept darting toward him. "Sir, there's no need to cause a scene." "I'm not causing a scene," Darius replied, still on the phone. "You already did that for me." She bristled. "I was just following policy." "Funny," he said. "I read your policy on the website. I must have missed the part about racial profiling." A few guests gasped. Someone pulled out their phone and started recording. Within 3 minutes, the lobby doors opened, and 2 men in dark suits stepped in. Behind them walked a man everyone in the New York hospitality industry knew on sight: Robert Kensington III, CEO of the Madison Crown Group. Chloe's posture stiffened. Mr. Kensington Sarai didn't. Kensington didn't even look at her. He walked straight to Darius. "Darius, I just got your message." "What happened?" Darius didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. "Your receptionist decided I didn't belong here. She tore my check-in ticket." In front of a lobby full of people. Kensington's jaw tightened. "Is that true?" Chloe's voice shook just enough to betray her. It's a misunderstanding." "No," Kensington cut her off. "It's not. You're done here. Security will walk you out." The lobby went silent again, but this time the energy was different, electric, charged with the sudden reversal of power. Chloe's eyes darted from Kensington to Darius, disbelief settling in. "Wait, you know him?" Kensington turned to her slowly. He's the man who's about to become our largest private investor. If the marble floors had frozen earlier, now they shattered. The weight of her mistake crashed down in front of everyone. Darius picked up the torn ticket halves and held them for a moment before dropping them in the trash. Looks like I can afford the place after all. That was the beginning. But what happened next, what Darius did with that moment, was far bigger than a single act of justice in a hotel lobby. It became a reckoning. The moment Chloe was escorted out, the lobby seemed to breathe again. Conversations resumed in hushed tones, but the glances Darius caught weren't pitying anymore. They were something closer to admiration, or maybe relief. People love watching the mighty fall, especially when they'd been standing on someone else's neck. Kensington placed a hand on Darius's shoulder. Let's go somewhere private. I want to make this right. Darius studied him for a beat. Right isn't a private word, he said quietly. Not tonight. Kensington tilted his head, understanding the implication. All right, then we'll make it public. They moved toward the elevator, and by the time they stepped into the gold-trimmed cab, the incident was already on 3 guests' Instagram stories. One had tagged the Madison Crown Hotel account. Another had added captions like "Racism in 2025" and "Do better." Social media wasn't a wave, Anna Maria, it was a lightning strike, and this one was about to hit. Upstairs, in the penthouse conference suite, Kensington poured 2 glasses of single malt whiskey. Darius didn't touch his. I need to say this, Kensington began. What happened downstairs, that's not who we are. Darius leaned back in the chair, crossing his arms. That's exactly who you are. Not you personally, maybe. But your hotel, your brand, your staff? That wasn't an isolated glitch. That was a culture that told her she could look me up and down and decide I didn't belong. Kensington looked like he'd been punched. I'm not going to defend her. Good, Darius said, his tone even. Don't. But don't pretend she came up with that attitude in a vacuum. She learned it somewhere. And as long as the people at the top stay in denial, it's going to keep happening. Kensington nodded slowly. So tell me what you want. Darius glanced out the window. The city was a sea of lights below them, glittering and indifferent. I want a public apology. From the hotel. And from you. I want Chloe's termination to come with a statement about why. And I want your diversity training program overhauled by people who actually understand this problem, not just a PR team looking for buzzwords. Kensington took a slow sip of his drink. Done. What else? That's not a small ask. You're not a small man, Kensington said, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Darius didn't smile back. One more thing. Tonight's incident isn't going away. When the press calls, I'll be speaking. And I'll tell the truth. You can either be on the right side of that conversation, or you can try to spin it. Your choice. Kensington set his glass down. I'll stand with you. By morning, the story was everywhere. The grainy phone video of Chloe tearing the ticket had gone viral, amplified by the crisp, high-definition clip of her being escorted out while Darius stood calmly at the counter. The contrast between her flushed face and his controlled composure made it cinematic. CNN called it a lesson in corporate accountability. Twitter called it the most satisfying 2 minutes of the week. Black Twitter called it Tuesday. But it wasn't just the outrage. It was what Darius said when reporters caught him outside the hotel the next day. This isn't about one receptionist and one businessman. This is about the everyday moments when people decide they can shrink you, tear you down, make you small. And this is about deciding not to let them. Not everyone was on his side. The comment sections were split. Some wrote, "Play the race card much." Others, "She was just doing her job." And then there were those who dug up old photos of Chloe at parties, claiming they proved she wasn't racist because she had a black friend once in college. Darius didn't engage. He wasn't here to win internet debates. He was here for something bigger. 2 nights later, he was at the rooftop restaurant for the merger dinner. The irony wasn't lost on him. 2 days ago, he'd been told he didn't belong here. Now, every staff member in the building seemed to know his name. His table was ready before he arrived. The real estate mogul, Victor Levingston, was already seated. A tall, broad man with silver hair and a smile that could close deals without a single slide deck. "I saw the video," Levingston said as Darius sat down. "You handled that with class. I like that in a partner." Darius gave a small nod. "I wasn't looking for attention." "Sometimes it finds you," Levingston replied. "The question is, what do you do with it?" They talked business for an hour, but the undercurrent of the conversation was clear. Levingston wasn't just investing in a company, was investing in the man across the table. When the deal closed later that night, it was the largest single investment Darius's firm had ever received. But success wasn't the real victory. The real victory came a week later, when the Madison Crown Hotel announced a full review of its hiring practices, a new anti-bias training program developed in partnership with a national racial justice organization, and a $1 million scholarship fund for underrepresented students pursuing hospitality careers. In the press conference, Kensington stood beside Darius. Cameras flashed as he said, "What happened here was wrong. We own it. And we're changing. Not because it's good PR, but because it's the right thing to do." Darius stepped up to the podium next. Accountability isn't about perfection. It's about what you do after you get it wrong. This hotel got it wrong. But today, they're starting to get it right. Chloe's name trended briefly again when she gave a tearful interview on a daytime talk show, claiming she'd been misunderstood and vilified. But by then, the narrative had moved on. The conversation wasn't about her Anna Maria, it was about the broader culture that made her think she could get away with it. And that was exactly where Darius wanted it to be. Weeks later, as he walked through another luxury hotel lobby this time in Chicago, Darius caught the eye of a young black bellhop. The kid gave him a quick nod, the kind of unspoken acknowledgement that carries 1,000 words. Darius nodded back. Because sometimes, the win isn't just the deal you close or the policy you change. Sometimes, it's knowing that someone who looks like you will walk up to a counter tomorrow and be treated like they belong because you made sure of it. The snow had just started falling when Darius landed back in Atlanta. It was the first quiet moment he'd had since the incident. No cameras, no statements, no lawyers drafting careful sentences. Just the hum of the city he'd grown up in, the streets that had taught him resilience long before boardrooms ever tested it. But quiet didn't mean the storm had passed. On his second day home, his phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. Normally, he'd let it go to voicemail, but something made him pick up. "Mr. Cole." The voice on the other end was low, measured, and carried that particular weight of someone used to being listened to. "This is Senator Reeves. I think we should talk." Darius wasn't surprised. The senator had a reputation for pushing racial equity legislation, but he also had a keen sense for moments that could capture public attention. "About the hotel thing?" Darius asked. "About what the hotel thing represents," Reeves said, "and how fast that window for real change is going to close if we don't act." They met 2 days later in a private corner of a midtown cafe. Reeves didn't waste time. "You've got more visibility right now than most activists get in a lifetime," the senator said, stirring his coffee without drinking it. "People are listening to you, Darius. But if all they hear is that one receptionist got fired, it'll fade. It always does." Darius leaned back. "I'm not trying to be a public figure." Reeves gave him a pointed look. "You already are. The question is, are you going to use that, or let it use you?" That hit harder than Darius expected. He thought about the video, how it had been dissected in reaction clips, argued over on podcasts, stitched and remixed until it became less about him and more about everyone's version of him. "What are you suggesting?" he asked. "Leverage," Reeves said simply. "Not for yourself. For something bigger. You've got corporate ears right now. We push for hospitality industry standards, mandatory anti-bias training, public diversity reporting, consequences with teeth. If the Madison Crown can make $1 million scholarship fund to clean up their image, imagine what a dozen hotel chains could do under pressure." That night, Darius sat in his home office, staring at the city lights. He'd built his life around calculated risks, investments, mergers, market plays, but this felt different. This wasn't about ROI in dollars. It was about capital that couldn't be measured on a spreadsheet. The next morning, he called Reeves back. "I'm in." The weeks that followed were a blur of meetings, media appearances, and late-night strategy calls. They called the initiative the Open Doors Alliance, a coalition aimed at breaking systemic bias in hospitality. But not everyone welcomed it. Anonymous emails began landing in Darius's inbox. Some were thinly veiled threats, others just pure venom. "Stay in your lane. Stop trying to ruin people's lives over a little mistake. We know where you live." He ignored most of them, but when one arrived with his home address in the subject line, he forwarded it straight to the police. It was a reminder: power draws enemies as quickly as it draws allies. Meanwhile, Chloe wasn't disappearing quietly. She'd found a sympathetic corner of the internet willing to frame her as the victim, claiming she'd been set up and targeted for cancellation. Her interviews leaned heavy on buzzwords: Woke mob, trial by social media, destroyed my life. Some networks ate it up. Others saw through it. But the noise was enough to stir division. One evening, while prepping for a live panel discussion, Darius's publicist slid a folder across the table. Inside were screenshots of Chloe's old tweets, Facebook posts, even a private group chat she'd been part of. Racist jokes, derogatory memes, things she'd insisted she'd never said. His publicist's eyes were sharp. We can leak this. End her credibility for good. Darius stared at the folder. He thought about the humiliation in the lobby, the smirk, the tear of the ticket. And then he thought about the bigger picture. No, he said finally, pushing the folder back. We're not here to win against her. We're here to win against the mindset that made her think it was okay. By spring, the Open Doors Alliance had secured commitments from 4 major hotel groups. Each pledged transparent hiring data, annual anti-bias training designed by independent experts, and a zero-tolerance policy for discriminatory conduct with public accountability reports. It was a start, not the finish line, but a line in the sand. And yet, Darius knew the fight wouldn't end neatly. At a gala celebrating the Alliance's early wins, he gave a speech that wasn't polished for comfort. Racism doesn't care if you wear a uniform or a suit. It doesn't care if you work at the front desk or own the building. It's in the small moments, the split-second decisions, the looks that tell someone they don't belong. That's what we're here to tear up, not just a piece of paper, but the idea behind it. The applause was thunderous. But Darius didn't smile. He knew applause was easy. Change was hard. One late night, months after the hotel lobby incident, he found himself back in New York on business. Out of habit, he avoided the Madison Crown, booking instead at a quieter boutique hotel in Soho. But fate, or maybe irony, had other plans. As he was leaving the hotel restaurant, a voice called his name. He turned and there was Chloe. No camera crew this time. No crisp uniform. Just a woman in a faded coat, looking like she hadn't slept in weeks. "Darius," she said, her voice uncertain. He didn't move closer, didn't invite conversation. But he didn't walk away either. "I wanted to say," she trailed off, swallowing hard. "I'm sorry. It wasn't performative. There was no audience, no script. Just 2 people in the quiet hum of the lobby. I didn't think about how it felt," she continued. "I just saw you, and I made an assumption. And I can't take it back." Darius studied her. He could see the crack's guilt, maybe, or just the weight of consequences finally settling in. "I hope you learned from it," he said simply. She nodded. "I am." They parted without shaking hands. Walking back to his room, Darius realized something. The lobby incident had started as a moment of humiliation, morphed into a movement, and now months later it was just a thread in a much larger tapestry. And maybe that was the real work. Not the headlines, not the viral clips, but the slow, unglamorous stitching together of something better. Because in the end, you don't win against racism with one confrontation. You win by making sure the next confrontation never needs to happen. 6 months after that night in the Madison Crown Hotel, Darius stood on the steps of the New York Public Library. It was a clear summer evening, the kind where the city seemed to hum with possibility. Behind him, banners for the Open Doors Summit flapped gently in the breezy event that, just a year earlier, would have been nothing more than a hypothetical in a late-night brainstorm. But tonight, the steps were packed. Hotel executives, civil rights leaders, hospitality workers from every borough, journalists with lenses trained on the podium. And right in the center of it all was Darius, his name now synonymous with a movement he hadn't asked for but had chosen to lead. Kensington was there, standing a few feet behind him, no longer just the hotel magnate who'd been caught in a PR nightmare. Now he was a committed partner in policy change. Senator Reeves was in the front row, arms crossed, but smiling. Darius adjusted the mic. 6 months ago, he began, I walked into a hotel lobby to check in for a meeting. I left with a torn piece of paper and a moment that went viral. But what happened in that lobby wasn't new. It wasn't shocking for millions of people who live it every day. The only thing unusual was that a camera was rolling. A ripple of agreement moved through the crowd. I've been asked 100 times what I wanted out of that moment. Justice? Revenge? A headline? The truth is, I wanted none of those things. I wanted it not to have happened in the first place. And until that's true for everyone, until walking into a hotel, or a store, or a classroom doesn't come with the question, do I belong here? Then our work isn't done. He glanced over at the cluster of hotel workers wearing name tags from properties all over the country. Some of you came here straight from your shifts. Some of you took a day off you couldn't afford. You're the ones who can make the most difference because you see the guests before anyone else does. You decide, in that first moment, whether they feel welcome or small. And you can choose better. The applause came in waves, but Darius wasn't done. This isn't just about hotels. It's about the culture we build every day, choice by choice. My father delivered mail for 30 years, and he used to tell me, "Son, the door you open for someone else might be the one they've been waiting on their whole life." That's what the Open Doors Alliance is about. Not charity, not tolerance, opportunity. He stepped back, and Kensington took the mic to announce the Alliance's next milestone, a nationwide hospitality diversity certification, a gold standard that hotels could earn by meeting measurable equity benchmarks. It was voluntary now, but the pressure was already mounting. Guests would soon choose where to stay based on whether a property had earned it. When the summit ended, Darius found himself in the quiet of the library's marble foyer, away from the flashing cameras. That's when a young woman approached him, early 20s, wearing a server's black and white uniform. "Mr. Cole," she said, hesitating. "I just wanted to say thank you." He smiled politely. "For what?" "I work at a hotel in D.C. We had this couple check in last month, and the guy at the desk was about to pull some crap. You know, the kind of thing you dealt with. But the new training kicked in, and the manager stepped in. Treated them like VIPs. It was the first time I saw policy actually change something in real time." Her voice shook just a little. It felt good, like I was part of something better. Darius felt a quiet warmth settle in his chest. "That's the point," he said. "Not the headlines. Not the speeches. Moments like that." She nodded, thanked him again, and disappeared back into the crowd. Later that night, back at his Hotel 1, proudly displaying the new certification, Darius ordered room service. The waiter who delivered it was a tall, soft-spoken man with a Kenyan accent. "Welcome, Mr. Cole," he said warmly. "It is an honor to have you here." Darius chuckled. "You know me?" The waiter grinned. "Everyone in hospitality knows you now. You remind us we are more than uniforms. That we are the first chapter of someone's story when they arrive." After he left, Darius sat at the small dining table, looking at the steaming plate in front of him. The fight was far from over. There would be more Chloes, more torn tickets, more moments of humiliation for people who didn't deserve it. But there would also be more managers stepping in, more policies that actually meant something, more quiet victories nobody would ever film. And maybe that was enough for tonight. Weeks later, an article in The Atlantic profiled the Alliance's work. The writer described Darius not as a businessman who stumbled into activism, but as a builder of companies, of opportunities, and of bridges that didn't exist before. When he read it, he thought of his parents. His father with his postal bag, his mother grading papers at the kitchen table. They'd taught him that dignity wasn't negotiable, that worth didn't need to be proven. The hotel lobby incident hadn't made him who he was. It had just shown the world what his parents had raised him to be. On the anniversary of that night, Darius returned to the Madison Crown. The lobby was the same polished marble floors, the warm glow of chandeliers, the faint scent of fresh lilies near the entrance. But the air felt different. Guests of every background checked in without hesitation. Staff members greeted them with the easy warmth of people who understood they were there to serve, not judge. Kensington spotted him from across the room and walked over, extending his hand. "We've come a long way." Darius shook it. "And we've got a long way to go." They both knew it was true. As he stepped outside into the crisp night air, Darius glanced back at the hotel one last time. The memory of that torn ticket would always be there, but so would the knowledge of what had grown from it. Sometimes change doesn't come in sweeping revolutions. Sometimes it starts with something as small as a rip in the middle of a lobby and a decision not to let it end there. And in that choice, Darius had found not just justice, but purpose. The kind that can't be torn in half. The end. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.